Welcome back, guys. This is episode 9. The season is over, but yet we're still going to talk about all the news in Moto for this week.
Guys. This is episode 9.
And it's live as always, so we're going to have technical difficulties. That is a fact. And yeah, trying a new time here for the morning as opposed to doing lunchtime for guys. So let me know if you guys think that is better or worse. And I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and is getting ready to consume their asses off for Christmas, because that's what the country wants you to do, is to just buy. Coach, how are you doing?
We are doing good, buddy. It's good to see you, and congratulations. You've had a the last couple of weeks have been pretty busy for you.
Yeah, no, it has been fun racing again, right? Not the scary racing of racing dirt bikes or anything, because sadly, I want to say that I don't miss racing. So in this episode, when we talk a little bit about JLaw and the couple conversations I have, and then his video saying that he doesn't want to do a gate drop, I know a lot of people were like, hey, why doesn't he want to do a gate drop? Because that's what we have to do. And truthfully, I have got no desire whatsoever to do a gate drop either, right? Like, it's just sometimes when you do stuff for so long, it's just repetitive and you want to refresh things. Like we were talking in the chat room before the show even started that I can't multitask. I'm trying to look at all the programs that I got here. But no, we were talking about like just innovating, right? Just trying to keep things new. And so I get where he's coming from when he's saying he doesn't want to do a gate drop. He wants to do a bunch of festival stuff. But with that, you almost feel, is it in his best interest to do festivals? Because then he might get in more trouble with rolling golf carts and whatever.
Rental cars through the track.
What are your thoughts on
the
whole thing?
When it comes to innovating, it's difficult because as human beings, it's a catch-22 because we all resist change. And yet we all want change. We enjoy change. Look at it this year with World Supercross coming in, and then we have the SMX series, and how much resistance was it met with? There's confusion. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the year, I don't think many people thought that the SMX series was a bust. Most people thought it was really good. Obviously, World Supercross is still trying to innovate and continue to get better and better. And I'm going to steal one of your lines, Johnny, that is all, rising tide rises all ships. And so when you stop and you think about that, on one hand, we all gripe about, oh man, this changed, let's keep it the way it used to be. And then we enjoy some of the new elements to it. I think that's where stuff like the internet, I get asked this question all the time. I'm in essentially what's called a service-based business. At the end of the day, back in the old days, I could only be beside the track so many hours a day. And then tomorrow morning, I was back at the track starting all over again. And now, thanks to like being able to do meetings like this with the internet, with YouTube and things, we have a membership area where we've got a couple thousand people. We've got digital products that people can download and purchase at any given time. And people like that. But then on the flip side, when we're trying to come out with something that is not just going to be the same regurgitation of the same topics about the same 4 people, that's why I do enjoy doing the show. And I do appreciate, I don't think the average listener understands how much time and energy you do put into making these shows a reality every week, because there is a boatload of a time and effort that does go into it. So I do agree. Innovation is great.
Big procrastinator. I don't work hard at all.
It just falls on your lap, right?
Yeah. Everything is just easy.
I think the innovation is great. And then, we jump into the dirt bike side of things. Look at how much it's innovated just this year. We heard about the Stark, and I don't know about you. It seemed like there was rumblings about it for a couple of years. And then it seemed like this year, it was like it went from just on this nebulous concept to boom. You got Josh Hill going out there and him and his brother shredding on it. All right. And then we're like, okay, that's cool. Gave it some credibility. The feedback on it was pretty solid. And then look at it now. You've got all the media outlets going out. Was it Pierre that got a chance to or
Yeah, up here with
a couple of our guests have had a chance to actually ride it. So think about it. It's gone from this nebulous concept to only a few people could get a chance to ride it because there wasn't a lot of them, to now all the media people are getting a chance to actually ride it. And then lo and behold, boom. All of a sudden we this week had the drop of the Triumph as you did the intro video on it and all of its uniqueness. And like you said in your review video, if we look at the bar that Triumph is setting, what in the world's going to happen when Ducati comes out? It's going to be unbelievable. So even though that started out as a benign comment that you just made, think about just what 23 is looking like in regards to a lot of new things, new series, new bikes, new teams, couple bouncing around, which is a little frustrating for like a Savachi or, in the enduro cross not being allowed to run it. But, a lot of change. I think change is good. I personally do. Selfishly, for me, being in the physiology world, the only way a body can really adapt, get stronger, is it has to be stressed. And obviously, there's that fine line. So I think the series being stressed created better. The athletes getting stressed. I don't think that the athletes getting pushed the way they did this year ended up rising their boats. I think it actually caused some of their boats to sink, but it has created a new level of awareness for sure.
Yeah, there's another saying that if things are going to stay the same, they have to change. Just meaning that nothing ever stays the same. And I don't think a lot of people that at least some of the people in my circle understand as to how innovation comes about and how big corporations look at opportunities. They Once interest rates are super low, they can go leverage themselves. Like they can use other people's money to get ahead, right? And then when things tank, they've got that money on there that they can go and invest and get way ahead of than what a typical person wants to go with. Like when young people or the middle class wants to open up a business, we think about, hey, I want to have all my bills paid. I want to have everything paid. I really don't want to use anyone else's money. And big corporations or the middle class, they will go use their money. They will go take money from the bank and whatnot, and then it's really on them. Where big corporations, I'm talking like Honda, Stark, World Supercross, what they do is they go take other people's money, right? And then those are the guys that hold most of the risk. And I think that's
Yep.
part of the reason why we are seeing such a uptick in new teams. You got Beta, you got Stark, you got Ducati now, you got Triumph. There's a lot of new money being put into place, and it has a lot to do with the pandemic, to be honest, because that was a horrible thing that happened. Yes, absolutely horrible. Hopefully nothing ever gets shut down again. The way everything was handled just seems inadequate because it really put people ahead of most people. And my point is, with all that bad stuff, there's actually some good stuff that has happened with the sport. World Supercross was able to get more investors. Arena Cross was able to revamp stuff. You've got these new teams coming in place. And so it's been good. But because of that, it's coming back onto the consumer, where inflation is realistically probably 20%. So that's why bikes are being so much more expensive. And even Honda and Yamaha, their new bikes, I'm sure here in the next year or so, if they aren't already for the 2024s, are going to be $800 to $1,500 more expensive. That's
Yeah.
just unfortunate. That's just where we are right now. That's what happens when the Fed just continue to print money. But we do have them to thank as well, because you got new bikes coming in where they normally probably wouldn't have tried to go into this market unless they had it was cheaper for them. To the level of entry was lower. I know that was
Yeah.
a really open-winded explanation to what I think with that. But with the whole new Triumph here, let me open this up a little bit. No, that's the new Tesla. The new Tesla looks sweet. But here, I'll put this guy on mute. But a lot of the things that what they showed in here, which was interesting, is I know there's some rules against traction control, but I believe the rules are open with having some sort of traction control if it comes standard to the public. So I
Yep.
think this is good for the consumer, yes, but it's also really good for the factories, because then the factories get to use their probably high dollar factory traction control stuff, if I'm speculating at all. And then one of the things that I was bummed to see on this bike, because this bike looks awesome, there's a lot of features on it that is more premium than what you would get at a normal bike shop. But some of the stuff, as far as they had like some add-on accessories that they showed, and where are they? Just
Well,
when it came to their electronic start on the front fender and things of that nature. So it's kind of bummer that they're advertising for stuff that doesn't come standard on the bike. But all in all, very excited for the new Triumph. The motor does look like a KTM motor that's just backwards. And then the frame does kind of give me Yamaha YZ250 vibes with some of the cutouts on it. So I guess they got to take the best from what's already around. Like you've heard me say before that
hmm
originality is just undetected plagiarism. So why wouldn't they
hmm
do that with a bike?
Sure. Well, you bring up something that I was going to ask you about off the air, but we could talk about it here collectively. I don't understand, and I never can pronounce the word, the homogenation or whatever the hell that is, where you have to have X amount of units that are in mass production before it can make its way to the track, to the races. How does that make any sense whatsoever? Like, all this is doing is it continues to drive up the price for the average consumer. Like you said, if it's an add-on, great, let it be an add-on, build the bike where you can put these features onto it. But this bullshit about, well, we now have a 12, a $15,000 motorcycle, and it's got these attributes to it, so that if we go and we sell enough of these bikes, or we've produced enough bikes, whether they've sold or not, well, then it allows the factory teams, the pro race teams, to be able to run it. You see how, to me, that just, I don't quite understand whether it's AMA or whatever governing body is responsible for creating these so-called rules. Again, it's not a matter of who makes the rules, who's breaking the rules. It just, to me, I always want it to where the threshold and that point of entry for the average user is lower. You know, it we see it all the time in our chat room here, where people are like, "Oh, great! Now we've got a $14,000-$15,000 bike." That's just making it more difficult for people to get in the door. And so when we break that down, it's just like, why do we have to have this rule that there has to be X amount of units produced in mass production that the average person has to foot the bill for to get, just so that they can appease some rule that allows them to be able to go race with these really cool features? When you talk about that being an add-on, how does that work, Johnny? Or maybe somebody in the chat room would know. So you have a bike that, let's call it stock, even though it's got all these cool components to it, and then it has the add-on features. What stamps the approval to say, okay, if this comes in a production bike as a non-add-on, does that mean it's been homogenized and now it can go to the pro team? I don't understand where that fine line is crossed. Do you?
I think the traction control on the handlebar is actual standard equipment, but the add-on like accessory for the RPMs on the front number plate, that is an accessory. And then they showed a couple other little accessories there. But no, I'm with you with maybe you can answer this too. Is like, why in the heck is mountain bikes $10,000? Basically that's like a 450 price,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so much less that goes into a mountain bike than a 230-pound dirt bike. That never made sense to me. Like I can get the whole supply and demand thing, but usually with demand, things get cheaper, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's not the case. I would assume that mountain bike racing and mountain bikes in general are more popular than dirt bikes. So I don't know. So therefore, by that logic, you would think that the dirt bikes would be twice as expensive as bicycles. But I don't know if you've ever thought about that at all.
No, I definitely have, because we actually had a downhill mountain bike team for a couple years. We were partners with Yeti bicycles, and you bring up something that I had said over and over and over again. If one of these top end mountain bikes are 10, this is before e-bikes. I don't want to get into the online debate. E-bikes suck. E-bikes are great. We need them. We don't need them. They've ruined the sport. They've grown the sport. Um, all I want to say about the price point of a mountain bike is what's so intriguing to me is the top end mountain bikes are on par with a 450, like you said, or at least a 250, 450. But the salary that those guys make, if we think our guys don't make much money, you'd be astounded at what little money the top mountain bike guys really make. Now, there's a few, Gwen Murray and those guys, or excuse me, Aaron Gwynn. Yeah, he's done very well for himself, but it's not because of just the mountain bike sponsor. It's once again going to be Red Bull and stuff like that. But no, I always say, and Johnny, you and I have talked about this when people laugh at how much money you spent for your tri bike. Until triathlons became important in your world. Yeah, exactly. Until triathlon became important in your world, you would have never entertained going and spending 10, 12, $15,000 on a tri bike. And then,
Oh hell no. Oh hell no. I still think it's a bad investment, coach. But that's we can talk about that later. I'm definitely going to get my monies out of it, but yeah, the barrier of entry is ridiculous, right? Like that's crazy.
This is where we get into the idea of like this bike that you see behind me right now. This is a time trial bike made by a company called Squad, and it's all carbon fiber. It's got the electric shifting, blah 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 blah. Well, I purchased this off of somebody who only raced it one time and rode it for 3 months, and I got it for half of what he paid to build it. So my point is this: to me, that bike, because I use it so much, that bike is to me, I can justify the amount of money I paid for it. This Yeti that you see right here, this is one of our SB66s. This is one of our dirt jumpers by Yeti, right? Because we had a partnership with Yeti. Well, if you look at the price point of those SB66s, the mainstream people would say, I would never spend money on a bike, not that much money on a bike. I could buy a car for that amount of money. As you're saying, you could buy a 450. It goes back to the idea of what is our, when I say our, everybody on this live webinar podcast together, what is our currency? What matters in our world? If you have a 5-year-old, and you may have seen this video going around on Instagram, they have a little boy sitting across the table, and there's like, I think it's 2 Oreos on the table and some cash. And they say, which one do you want? And the little boy chooses the Oreos. And the guy's like, are you serious? You want the Oreos? He's like, yeah, I want the Oreos, because that's his currency. And then, as we get older, then it becomes a cell phone. Then it becomes, we get our driver's license. It's that first vehicle, and then our dirt bikes, and on it goes. So if we come back to there it is right there. Watch this. This is so cool. Can you play the volume? You just muted it.
Can you hear it, Coach?
No, I cannot. I think the software mutes it.
Yeah, I think the software does.
But essentially, all he's doing is being asked, do you want the cash or the Oreos? And he chooses the Oreos. And it goes back to, I like the idea that if I want to drop an extra $4,000 and get all these extra bells and whistles, that's the whole premise behind the factory edition, which I think is cool. The fact that you can roll a bike off of the showroom floor and it's already got an aftermarket pipe. And like you said, I liked when you were doing the Triumph review and you're like, can we just come with these tires, and can we just have these types of perches, and, can we have better,
have the A6 come standard, and, just have it a clean package.
Yep. And the OEMs have done it, right? That's why we have all these new factory editions. But I like the idea that you could get a quote unquote 450, and then you can get a factory edition, but it comes back full circle. Can we try? I love the fact, and I'm going to show my age here. You look at how sophisticated the motorcycles are that these kids are riding on 85s. I mean, it makes Johnny O'Mara's Mugen 125 look.
I think I got like the audio.
This 2 out of the box Oreo cookies. Huh? Are you sure? That's $10,000 cash.
That was a great
Oreo
idea for
cookies?
that guy to
Are you
make
sure?
this video.
Okay, go ahead.
So it just validates, and everybody that's joining us here on this show together, we each have our own currency. Some of our people in our chat room would never consider spending $5,000+ for a used road bike. And Johnny, look at how much time and effort. And then when you went looking for your tri bike and you went
To be
in,
fair, I got this same deal as you. This guy did 2 Ironmans on it, but then hasn't really done much. And so I got it for 6.5, which
Right.
that was something where I was like, I can justify that being a bargain shopper that I am. And however, it was just the level of entry on stuff is just crazy, because how many more people would race motocross and potentially want to get into supercross if it was $5,000 to get a bike as opposed to 10, and then really if it was $5,000 for a brand new bike, and then you didn't need to go spend 1,000 to get revalved, or 10,000 if you're real serious, or $800 for a pipe, or 3,000 for new Hinson clutch and basket that's gonna withstand some nice levers and foot pegs and wheels and titanium bolts, this and that. Like, you could go crazy if you wanted to. It would just be nice to have, like, boom, here's the standard deal. Like, that's what the factory edition should be, but it should have, in my opinion, it should have some nicer stuff on it where it's just race ready. And again, it goes back to the whole why what we were originally talking about this was, how is it that the bike prices are so expensive, and the whole homologation rule where you have to have like 800 bikes on sale for consumers to buy to be able to race it, which I don't quite understand how Joey Savacci could do that then, because I don't know if the Triumphs are even out and available for people to buy. So I don't quite get that loophole if you're willing to kind of inch past that rule at all in order to let a new team in and bike out. It's like, they're, again, at that point, not really following the rules either. But my point is, have the whole full F1 class, the unlimited class, and then have a production class where they could be running a 2025 Honda or whatever they want, unobtainium stuff. And that's the elite of the elite. That's the best what we want to see, because as a consumer, we live and die by like bigger, faster, stronger. We don't want to watch a track and field deal or a marathon to see somebody not break a world record, right? We watch the Olympics because we want to see somebody break a world record, whether it's deadlift or whatever. Okay, same thing with motorcycle racing. We want to see the best of the best and the best equipment. And there is the way it is now is, it kind of feels as if it's cheating, because the factories have got some of this unobtainium stuff, but yet they're still playing as if like this is production level bikes. And it's just not true. It's just not true. So just change the name, move it over, do what MXGP is doing over in Japan, and then we have a production class.
Let me go 2 different directions on the same subject. I was watching a tribute to David Bailey, and this was back, in his heyday, and they showed at the Rose Bowl there were 62 or 63,000 people, and then they showed at the another Supercross they had over 70,000 people. That was in early 80s, right? Let's say it was 86, 87 timeframe. But yet we're being told that the attraction, the amount of people that are enjoying Supercross now is more than ever. Well, maybe somebody can look it up real quick. What's the capacity at A1? How many people did we see at A1 this year in 23? Okay.
It was 35, 40,000.
Okay. So just kind of pump the brakes right there. This is where, and I do promise you, it's all tied into the same conversation. Back in 85, 86, what was a CR250? What was a KX250? It certainly wasn't $12,000 to $15,000.
Somebody in the chat
Yeah, somebody help
well,
us
no,
out with
it
that.
was probably like $2,500 to be honest.
Because like my first motorcycle was a 78 RM80, and I remember looking at the brochure, right? It was $699, and you could buy a 125 for $1,400. I remember it like it was yesterday. And the reason why I'm saying is when we see this beautiful bike coming out by Triumph and it has all these attributes to it, unfortunately, the consumer gets screwed because we have to have all of this crap on it that we have to pay for. Now, this is where I'm saying it's relevant, but let's change the narrative. Let's not talk about going and racing at the highest level. I think the days are gone where we win on Sunday, sell on Monday. I don't think that that's accurate anymore. If you and I and everybody in the chat room owned a racetrack together, we need people pulling into the front gate with motorcycles. So when we were talking about growing the sport and we keep getting shoved down our throat that we have to buy a $15,000 dirt bike because it has to meet some silly rule so that we can go race. Now come back to watching this tribute in this story about about David. Here's David out there on a Works CR250 racing against other people. It's no different than what we have right now. Am I making any sense at all, Johnny? I'm watching Johnny and Johnny O'Mara, David Bailey, Rick Johnson, Mark Barnett. All these guys are ripping around on Works motorcycles. This is back in 86 and 87, selling out 70,000 plus people at the Pasadena or the Rose Bowl. And we're being told that we and back then, like you said, let's say it was $2,500 for a 250. If you keep all things relevant, how could an OEM be able to afford a Works motorcycle? And let's say that time Honda had 3 riders, right? Bailey, Johnson, O'Mara. So all 3 of them are on Works bikes. There's 70,000 people in the stadium, and a bike's $2,500. So it immediately blows away. Well, the cost of living has gone up, and the cost of this, and all things relevant, inflation, the minimum wage, the whole 9 yards. Well, then I was watching that special and that tribute, and I was just like, that literally, if you just take the bike he's riding, 3 people on a team, 70,000 people in a stadium, minimum wage back then was probably $3.50. How do we get to where we're at today? I feel like we've kind of been bait and switched a little bit to say, well, we know, and I don't know if you want to say it's the responsibility of the AMA allowing the 4-stroke to come into competitive racing. You see where I'm going with this? And again, I don't want to bitch about it. What I want to do is let's come up with some more bikes. And Johnny, I know you've been preaching this sermon over and over again. I want to see more bikes coming into tracks. I want to see tracks start to grow because they've got 200, 300, 400 people on a Saturday afternoon who want to come out and ride their dirt bike. And they're not mortgaging the farm, and they're not, no disrespect, but when we get to a point that we have to offer financing on a recreational vehicle, I think we've hit a point where you might want to ask, why are we charging so much money? Or maybe that's not fair. They can charge whatever the hell they want. But if you're going to say you want the sport to grow and you want people who own racetracks, people who sell tires and gear, oil and race fuel, if you want to start moving that off the shelves, give me, like you said, Johnny, for $5,000, I can buy a tri bike, and I don't have to buy another bike for 4 or 5 years. And you want me to get into the moto market and I've got to drop over $10,000 just to get in? It's crazy.
I guess a little bit of a backlash before we move on to a different topic here.
Yeah.
The triathlon stuff is incredibly expensive, but yet there's still more people doing moto. And I guess you could maybe argue that maybe people don't want to train that much. They want to just do it on the weekend. And if you're not really training, you can't really line up for, but I mean, they've got different classes for the Ironman stuff. And I did a half marathon a couple weeks ago, and that was honestly with the Spartan, that was their highest grossing class, was the half marathon, which is crazy because like 90% of the people didn't even finish it, you know, but somehow I would think that the 5K, which is only 3 miles, would have been the biggest selling point because the ticket price was less and it's a distance that most people can actually complete. So that kind of changes my whole view on things of like, how is it that these Spartan guys are able to market their highest selling class to everybody and make it the most popular, which is interesting to me. And then your question about the cost of dirt bikes, really, it has, I'm just plain and simple. It just has to go with the Fed printing more and more money and our consumerism. Like, we are taught at a young age that we're supposed to be in debt and we're supposed to just buy stuff. And truthfully, productivity doesn't make the world go round. It's debt that makes the world go round. Because if you think about everybody, nobody is working we can't work twice as hard. We can't go from a 40-hour week to an 80-hour week. Like, people are just not going to do that. And then people that are doing 80-hour weeks, you can't do 106. There's just not that many hours. But what people can do is they can spend more. And if they spend more, well, then the whole everything gets elevated. We create more jobs and you got more people that are into the sport per se, right? But then it's a problem in itself that it eats itself, because as prices go up, you've got more jobs and you got people like Honda, CEOs at Honda and whatever. You've got riders like Sexton. He's not on Honda anymore, but you got these guys that are used to getting a certain salary. They're not going to all of a sudden say, hey, I want to have a smaller salary. So then who ends up fitting all these bills of all this stuff adding up? Well, it's the middle class. It's the consumer. It's not the guys at the top. Right. So then prices just continue to go up and up and up. And I think now we're just somewhat at a breaking point where people, they can't even afford the payments that they're getting, especially with rates being higher. Like, I was looking at the credit card that I use every month to pay off, they give nice rewards. And it's the only way to, like, why is it that the only way to raise your credit is debt? How is it that somebody that's really responsible for paying their bills on time and whatever, they've got like the shittiest credit score, and then somebody that is in debt up to their eyeballs that can barely make the minimum payments, they've got an 800 credit score? It's because it's by design. The economy runs off of debt, which is unfortunate. But the little example is, I was looking at the credit card I spend every month, and it is up to 32% if I don't make the payment. I mean, if I just let it lapse for the next month, it's 32% interest, which is crazy. And so I think people just they go to school, and especially here in motocross, professional athletes, they don't get a financial education. They will get a specialty education. Even the guys that are at the Millsaps training facility, whatnot, they're a specialist. However, they're not keen with dollars, which is a bummer. And on that note, Coach, let's switch gears a little bit, because you and I have both talked about this. As far as I made a wild accusation about, or like maybe a hypothesis about Stark, saying that Stark may not be the one to unleash the electric bike into the world of motorcycle racing, because the gatekeepers won't let them. Right? Until Honda and Yamaha and everyone has it, they're going to wait till these guys go broke, and then they can unleash their stuff. Well, what is actually happening to Taddy in Endurocross? Well, let me open up some of this stuff. Taddy signed a deal from KTM, and he was to develop the Stark, and it got approved to race the Endurocross stuff. And we even have Stark on their Instagram. They've been working really, really hard with FIM to get approval so that they can actually have a professional level series have their motorcycles. And so they did everything that FIM wanted them to do. But then right at the last second, where is it? Right at the last second, FIM changed the rule book less than 24 hours before their first race over here, and said that he no longer can race because some other teams were complaining that it's unfair and it's unsafe and whatever. So there was pressure, and now these guys are left out in the sticks. Here, well, I'll just read it. The series is an open class. Any motor size is okay, so long as it's a production enduro motorcycle. The regulations have included electric power motorcycles for several years, since KTM has in fact fielded a free ride, which is a pretty cool bike. It's kind of like the Sur-Ron, and remain the FIM documents are late as Thursday, which last time of the Enduro 21 look. But late Thursday night, the rulebook had suddenly been updated to show other categories, E1, E2, and E3 for all classes, no longer including electric motorcycles. By this time, Stark, Taddy, and his team were fully prepared and ready for the route to Levin. Crazy. Just without even letting them know, just boom, they show up at the race and they are not allowed to line up.
It's ridiculous. And, I'm not a litigious person whatsoever, but I would sue the living shit out of these people, because I'm sure they've got emails and correspondence, because they aren't going to spend all the time and the resources. They're not going to go get a rider of that caliber, because that's not cheap either. And then to take all the time. And then, as you said, there was a lot of communication back and forth. FIM was totally down on it. And then all of a sudden, nope, we're not doing it anymore. At that point, Stark needs to recoup the money that they've lost. Like I said, I'm not into everyone's a victim kind of a situation, but man, it does make you stop and wonder what the world's going on there. That's just lame at every level. But if it doesn't validate what you've already said, there's obviously some pressure and some clout from other OEMs that have just completely shit canned this whole project. And where does it go from here? That's going to be an interesting. I mean, what does the next stage look like? Have they released any other information as to what he's doing? Is he going to go jump on another bike so he can just race? I mean, what's he going to do?
I don't know what his contract looks like with Stark, but I'm assuming it was substantial to where there's not a non-complete clause and he can't go back to KTM. But the next round is in his hometown in Poland. So people are speculating that hopefully that there's some forward momentum done at some point. But it's very interesting. Like the Stark, I'd have to do a little bit more, because I believe one of the riders were signed up for World Supercross as well, and a lot of people are talking about like, well, you can't hear him. You can't hear him. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Well, eventually, if none of the bikes make noise, you'll be able to hear the rider go, bam, bam, come in to T-bone you. Hey, I'm on the inside. Like how many people race an enduro, right? If you do a GNCC or anything, you spend half the time screaming at people to be like, get out of your way, on your left, on your right, because it's a single track race course anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that really being a problem, because truthfully, I think most riders can't even hear their bike anyway. If you have a stadium filled of 40,000 people, they're not going to be able to hear Barsha's crazy rev anyway. And I've made the argument before as well, like most Supercross races that I've been to, I end up leaving early because I like hanging out right way at the top because I can see the whole track. I don't like being trackside because I don't know, it's hard to see. You get to see the one finish line, whatever, but no, I like to see the whole deal. But my point is, you end up getting contact high because of all the CO2 in the air, right?
Yeah.
Especially if the stadiums don't open up because it's too cold out, because Supercross is raced in the winter months,
Yeah.
And then you hear a lot of stories of people getting sick, throwing up, their kids, whatever. Like that's not good for. How was a Supercross? And you're like, oh, I took my whole family, but then we all got sick, but there's a way around it. If it was a total electric, I guess, could people get contact high from all the generators charging the batteries? Sure. Right. I'm not going to get in the argument that electric bikes are better for the environment, because at the beginning, not really. Okay. It's just innovation. They're going to be faster and just all around better with electronics on it. That's really the only reason. Less maintenance. That's really the barrier of entry is lower, actually, because you don't have to know as much to hop on a bike. I mean, you damn near don't even need to know how to shift, because there's no shifting involved in those things. But this to me really bummed me out. Like I wasn't surprised to read that Taddy wasn't allowed to race, but it was the whole dictatorship of possible pressure from some of the bigger manufacturers. And I don't know how Stark is going to survive. Like, hopefully they have enough investors to where they can survive. But the real true power and draw to Stark was them being first, right?
Mhm.
Because if you had the option for the Honda when it comes out here that Trey Kennard just raced versus the Stark, I'm going to go with Honda 100% of the time, because I know that, just by it's some crazy law. I can't remember it. Maybe I'll remember it and I'll put it in the comments down below. But Honda's been around for forever. So
Mhm.
they're going to be able to maintain this motorcycle. If I need parts for this motorcycle, I can get it. Stark could just disappear, and then I might need a new battery, and nobody has a battery. I got to spend 30 grand on eBay for a battery that has no warranty on it.
Yeah, the
So
economies of scale is definitely going to work, with the OEMs. There's no two ways about it. But ironically, Johnny, if we go back to what we talked about the first half of the show, what if Stark can come out and keep the price nominal, and they're more interested in just making sure that the consumer is able to get on a bike, and you and I own a track and we start seeing more and more electric bikes come in. We're getting our gate fee. People are able to ride for less money. Um, does that become a game changer? I would say yes. Hopefully Stark's doing everything they can to try to get as much, as you always say, bad press is good press. In this case with Taddy getting kind of screwed this way, does it make people say, hey, wait a second, that, all right, it's not fair, which we know it's not, but that bike was Taddy was going to go race that at the level that he is. He was going to race it. That to me just screams it provides credibility for that platform that it was raceable. We saw the Hill brothers shredding on it. So that to me brought more credibility. And now you're saying to me, hey, wait, you can get that with a slightly lesser price point. We've shown that the durability is there, the reliability is there, the price point. Maybe they will do, like you said, Johnny, offer a battery that has a warranty on it to try to offset some of that economies of scale. I mean, whether you like Musk or not, everybody kind of scoffed at the Tesla when it first came out. It was expensive. It's electric. Nobody wants them. And my gosh, how many Teslas do you see on the road now? And then now you've got an all electric BMW and you've got an all electric. There's a lot of new cars that are coming out that are literally all electric. You've got a truck that's
and
all
people
electric.
hate it. People hate them.
Yeah.
There's
But
the new Tesla that just got finally some demos on it.
yeah. Now again,
Crazy.
if you grew up in a Ford family, your dad was like, Chevys are a piece of crap, right? And if you grew up in a Chevy family, Ford stood for found on road dead. It was just in it, and you grow up
Or first on
believing
race
that.
day.
First on race day if you like Fords, but found on road dead if you don't like them. And that's the same thing here. If, like, for example, I'm never ever going to buy an electric anything. I'm never going to buy an electric truck. I'm not going to buy an electric car. It's just not my cup of tea. Now, I've seen your Tundra. It's badass. It's cool. It's got a lot of cool elements to it. But number one, I'm never going to pay that kind of money for a truck. And B, I'm never, ever going to buy an electric vehicle. Because to me, I think it's kind of humorous that you have to go plug it in to something that's being powered by a diesel engine. Now, I'm not going
Yeah,
against
my
the
truck
tree
you don't plug
huggers.
in.
Yeah, I'm not going against a tree hugger. I'm not going against environmentalists. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just not going to do the electric thing. That's not my cup of tea.
Coach, I think you're against the polar caps melting, right? You're killing the planet.
Killing the planet. But on the same token here, I am always going to stay, like, if I'm looking for a lower threshold of entry, which is not very much less, but it is, I'll just continue to ride two strokes. My sons and I, we can still tear them apart. We can have fun with them. We can hope both of my boys are old enough to drink now, believe it or not, for those of you that have followed me for a while. Because when I was working with Dunge, both my boys were under the age of 8, right? Now they both can drink. We're going to open up some beers in the garage and we're going to rebuild our 250s and we're going to have fun with it. And then we're going to love the smell of the 2-stroke premix and we're going to go ride. And yeah, it's not as fast as a 4-stroke, but it's fun. That's the way I look at it. But I always go back to, I don't like to complain about the fact that the tracks are not getting more and more people showing up and wanting to ride dirt bikes. And it goes back to the price point. Steve in the chat room brought up a really good point. We still have this stigma that we have to break that, oh, it's so dangerous, so dangerous, so dangerous. And if you go and you look at it, the amount of people that ride moto and how many are paralyzed, and then you look at how many people play football and how many of them are paralyzed or concussed, we have better odds than they do. If you're going to just work on sheer numbers, but like Steve said in the chat room, it's all about perception. Now, if you and I owned a track, Johnny, I don't think every jump has to be point to point. Build the track where all the jumps are tabletop. So you're good. You go full send mode. Little Johnny can jump on. He can safely jump back off. Reduce the risk
Well,
of
that's why it's
somebody yard
important to
darting
have
himself.
like a pro track and
Yeah,
amateur track. I think that was a big selling point for a lot of tracks to be able
absolutely.
to have that. Because yeah, I have noticed over the last 10 years, tracks have become easier and easier. That's why like still riding out in California is still super popular for anyone around the country because most of their lips and everything are still pretty big on some of their tracks, but even their
Yeah.
tracks are closing now too. But there's a lot of stuff going on here with the chat room and Coach, ask you a question like how much of you never buying an electric vehicle is based upon your ideology of your experience growing up inside a combustion engine, the smell, and just from sheer your experiences growing up. Because truthfully, regardless if it's better for the environment or not, because cobalt's hard to mine and whatnot. Like I'm not even getting in the debate that you need to go electric because it's going to save the world. At the end of the day, we're only going to live 100 years. So most people are selfish as F. Who cares? I know we want to like help everyone in our generation and generation, but like humans, we're not ants where we're not going to jump on a bomb and save the hive. We might do it for our own children, but for the group of people that we've never met, like unfortunately, we're very selfish individuals. So I think when it comes to everyone getting an electric is going to be shoved down everyone's throat. And you're not the consumer everyone's looking at least big corporations. They're looking at younger kids that they can basically conform them to their ideology of consumerism and having this cell phone that tracks them wherever they go, this new credit score crap and all sorts of stuff. They're not going to worry about it. If they say wear a mask, they're going to wear a mask. They're not worried about you. They're worried about your children and their children. That is their marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even think that they care if it's better for the environment or what. They will tell you it's better for the environment, but I'm assuming that electric vehicles are just going to be cheaper to make. They're going to be cheaper to make and cheaper to produce and control per se. But it is better technology, right? But my question is what is your justification of like never owning an electric vehicle
Well, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here.
or bike
Quite,
for that matter?
quite honestly, I am opposed to the idea that you have this block known as a battery that's not going to last for forever and it's going to get thrown into a landfill and there's no way it's ever going to go away. In 100% transparency, that's the reason why I'm completely opposed to them, because I think it's asinine. You're saying, and I'm not an environmentalist. Like you said, I don't go down that thread of thought, but quite honestly, that is the number one reason why I don't go down the road of electric, because I'm like, okay, so now you've got, instead of having these little small batteries, double, D's or whatever, okay, you throw those in the trash, they go out in the landfill. If you've ever walked by a place that's kind of full of rubbish, right? You see batteries and you're like, oh, wow, that's kind of shitty looking. And I'm like, all right, so now we're going to take these huge batteries from vehicles and we're going to start throwing them in a landfill. Well, unlike paper, which could be compressed and burnt and incinerated, now you have stacks upon stacks upon stacks of batteries. That to me, and like you said, it doesn't matter how advanced the technology gets. At the center of our biggest challenge is, all right, you go and you get the cobalt. We know it's extremely hard to get. We know that there's a lot that goes into that. Well, we don't have the technology yet to keep the retention of the charge that we're able to create. So you can go and you can give me all kinds of fancy technology and all that, where the number one technology needs to stem from, how do we retain the power of a battery? Just take that for face value. So seriously, the main reason why I don't like them is because I don't want to see a landfill start to become filled with shitloads of batteries, which like you said, I do agree with you. I'm not worried about, I don't believe, I think global warming is a joke. And I think a lot of that is politically driven. And again, this isn't to create a political platform or polarization of anybody. That's just my opinion. You're entitled to yours. We can agree to disagree on it. But for me, I'm always going to go and I tease Michaela about this all the time. At the end of the day, I will always make my decisions based on fiscal conservatism, period. I want the best price for the least amount of money. Now, I'm willing to pay a little bit more. Like I'll pay for a Honda Civic because I know we just bought one for our daughter. She went off to school. I'm okay paying for that Honda Civic because, as you say, Johnny, I have a confidence and a trust in the Honda brand, and I buy it and I move on. Well, I didn't buy an electric car. I didn't buy a hybrid car. I bought her a combustion engine car, reasonable price, bulletproof. It's got some nice technology in it. Drive that car. My last Honda Civic, I had 340,000 miles on it before it croaked. I paid, $13,000 for the Civic. So to me, I'm always going to make my decisions on fiscal conservatism. Always. I'm always going to always, and that's
with new
politics and everything
information.
involved. Say it
Sorry,
again.
Coach. I'm interrupting you.
No, go ahead, bud.
With new information, would you be willing to change your view? Let's say like here in the next 5-10 years, Apple, they're designing a solid state battery and it's supposed to retain more energy and be
Absolutely.
less
Yep.
harmful.
Well, like your truck,
supposedly.
the way that your truck recycles itself and recharges itself versus literally you just draw a battery down, you got to plug it in. I always go back to, remember when we were children, and I'm way older than you are, but you got an electric car for Christmas and it ran for about 3 minutes and then you had to charge it for 4 hours. You're like, this sucks, right?
Yeah,
And
no, it definitely sucks.
yeah, it sucked. And I understand it's made progress, it's getting further, but I always go back to, wait a second, I'm having to pay more and more because it's quote unquote electric. And I don't care how well it's built. Eventually it's gonna crap out. Then that stuff's gonna sit in a landfill that's non-biodegradable. That's stupid. When now, if you can show me, and I'm sure some genius will come up with this, if you can show me a way to recycle a battery, like when you look at you go to a playground, you've got your young daughter, you go to the playground and that says this bench is made with recycled plastic. To me, that's genius, right? It's like, okay, we've multi-used something. Somebody thought far enough and ahead and said, or maybe they didn't, right? The mother of invention is necessity. Somebody says, hey, wait a second, we don't need to have all these plastics sitting in a landfill. If we can, and of course now we all as civilians, we have this little recycle bin that we've got. What's that?
Oh, just a comment in the chat by Christopher says, "Give the government more money and power, and they'll fix the weather."
Amen. Well, and to that point right there, right? What annoys me is, why do I have to pay a tax for, like, for example, I rent a lot of cars because we travel so much, and you go and you look at the rental car agreement, and there's a tire excise tax, there's a battery tax. How does taxing me $3 on a car rental help offset the environmental impact of a battery that's going to come out of a rental car eventually? It's right in line with what he's saying. It's just like, how does the government think that raising taxes or taxing everything is going to reverse the environmental concerns? And again, I will sit with anybody that will have an adult conversation and
It's a play on words, is what it is.
but I don't want to get into name calling. I don't want to be called you're dumb, you're stupid, you're not open-minded. I am. I'm very open-minded. But at the end of the day, I will always make my decisions politically based on financial conservatism. If you're going to fuck, pardon my language, if you're going to mess with the macroeconomic wheel, you're going to get smashed. And we're seeing it right now when the cost of living is up 21%, right? And eventually, and I say this over and over again, I don't care if you own a cake shop, who you will and won't sell to.
CPI says it's only like $8, 8% or something. But
yeah, it's
that's
bullshit.
Another argument because it's playing on words.
No, it's bullshit. And so for me, if you own a cake shop and you're choosing who you are or aren't going to sell to, I may not agree with it. I just keep my wallet in my pocket and I walk to the next cake store. I don't need to go in and start yelling at people and tell them they're short-minded and they're homophobic and all this other crap. Just take my checkbook and go, or we don't use checkbooks anymore, but I'm going to take my wallet and go somewhere else. And it's the same thing with buying a 2-stroke, buying a 4-stroke, or buying an electric bike. It's just like buying a Honda Civic hybrid, electric car, or a combustible engine. I'm just going to go, I know for me,
Yeah,
it's
the
less
technology is
expensive.
going nuclear. It's going to be a nuclear
Mm-hmm.
bomb because it's going to be hydrogen is what
Mm-hmm.
they're going to do because it's going to be it's going to be faster to
Yep.
recharge.
Yeah.
But again, it's a bomb is what it is. There's going to
Yeah.
be millions of bombs driving around or even on the track.
Yeah. Well, and then you get back to the whole idea of when you look, we're fortunate enough that we get to travel the globe quite a bit. We just got back from Costa Rica. And what you'll see down there, Johnny, is single cylinder. I'm going to use for the sake of our listeners. It's literally a single cylinder CB 125 is what it's all you see running around Costa Rica. They're air cooled, 150 cc's, one pipe down the bottom, and 4 people riding on it everywhere. So you can sit here and yeah, you can use the United States, and I know we've got the big numbers and all that other stuff. Well, go to China, go to Korea, go to all these other big countries where what do you see? You see these little single cylinder 125 to 150s running around. So it's like, all right, so how much of this is, all right, you remember, did you ever watch that Netflix special, El Chapo, about the drug dealer? Did you ever see that?
No, I did
There's
not.
there's this one line that just stands in my mind over and over again. And in his country, they're fabricating cocaine. And he says to the guy that's kind of heading all this up, he says, "Our people like it. Americans will love it." And he's like, I'm just going to find a way to import it into the States, and then the rest is history, right? So this whole idea of if you're looking at it from an economic standpoint and a sustainability standpoint and a reliability standpoint, then why are all these other countries, and Jace at Gypsy Tales talks about it all the time, the lion's share of motorcycles are not sold in the United States. They're sold in other countries. Well, why do we not see those other countries running around with electric motorcycles? Because of the cost, because of the reliability, because of the efficiency, the ability to replace them, economies of scale. And in this conversation, we could continue to spin it in circles for hours. It's just that's how I make my decisions on it. I want the ease of use. I want, if I'm going to maintain it, I want it to be economical. I want it to be super dependable. And that's why I look at a Honda Civic as a vehicle. How do you argue with that? It's reasonably priced, it's bulletproof, very reliable. That's where I'm going to spend my money. And when somebody wants to start messing with the economic model, like we saw with the COVID debacle, and then you start seeing this with this, everything's got to be electrical. Well, who pays the price for it? Like you said earlier, and
It's the
that's when
consumer.
I'm out. I'm like, fuck that. When the average person has to spend, how much did you pay for your truck? $80,000.
Yes, I did. And there's some. If you go to my crypto channel, I talk a little bit more about leasing and things of that nature on
Yeah,
how it ends up working out as far as leveraging to where I'm not the one at risk for it. It's actually Toyota, so
yeah.
I don't give a shit if it gets a little bit of scratched or whatever. I've got insurance
Mm-hmm.
on it, and I'm just gonna trade it in for the next thing, and then Toyota's gonna pay me 30 grand to give it back.
Yep.
I've done that for a decade, and it's worked really well. But again, that's again one of the things that I try to teach on the other channel is financial literacy, because a lot of people they think of leasing stuff as, oh, this is bad. Like even whenever I was racing, I went to bike shops and I said, hey, can you sponsor me? But let's do it in this way. Like if you're not able to run the numbers to actually give me a bike, let me lease a bike from you, and this is what we'll do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out way better for me. Yes, I gave bikes back, but anyway, I could talk about some of the little loopholes um, on on that deal, but yeah, it's ridiculous how again, and it's because we're not taught how to not be just spending more and more money, and this is kind of where we're at right now, where everyone wants the newest and greatest thing, and it goes back to, have you seen this before, Coach?
No.
you've got this man in a jail cell and he's reaching a stick for bread rather than the
Yeah.
key,
Yep. There you go.
right? And
Yep.
it symbolizes this is self gratification, instant. Hey, I need this right now. This is going to make me feel better, rather than having the self discipline and control to actually control your own freedom, right?
Yep.
And that's partially why what we've given up, especially with the whole this stuff,
Yep.
right? Because how many times do you look at this throughout the day and it knows everything about you, and you get certain ads and whatnot? And that's why, like, I'm honestly really nervous about my daughter growing up in this kind of a world, because it's up to me to teach her right from wrong and whatnot.
Hmm.
And if I let her watch the news all the time and they're gonna run this ideology that I don't believe, I don't trust. Like, I get a lot of smack for having some different views, especially on here on the internet, for being, I would say that I'm more of a libertarian, but I do have a lot of some views. Like, I drive an electric truck, right? It's half electric, whatever. I get lots of smack for that stuff. Doesn't mean that, like, I don't believe in capitalism and the government to stay the F out of my business,
Life. Yeah. Your life.
if there's anything my YouTube shows, is it's like, for the longest time, I kind of made this bad rep, right? Is like, it was, let's tear down the system, let's do this, and then somewhere I realized, like, that can only get you so far. Truthfully, genetically, how we've survived for the last 200,000 years is we've had to be in groups, so I've been working kind of backwards to help build rather than destroy, because you can only do so much by it's like having the ballad on a song, your favorite artist. You can listen to that song 1,000 times when you're feeling shitty, but eventually you don't want to feel shitty anymore. So you gotta switch to nicer stuff, and that's
Yep.
that's just how that is. But this has all been based on poor Taddy with Stark not being able to race anymore, because he signed to race specifically for the Enduro Cross, and he's being told no, he cannot do that. And he's being told, the FIM told him, hey, this works. And then at the last second, they said no. So there's some sort of pressure coming from somebody, right? And I
Yep.
would assume, if I'm speculating, I assume that this is coming from the other manufacturers, is they don't want Endurocross to potentially have Stark win an Endurocross championship. Stark, of course, they want to win an Endurocross championship, but everyone, the rest of the world, doesn't want them to win. And we talk a lot here recently, because we spent the last 20 minutes talking about how you don't want to have an electric anything because of the implications to landfill and whatnot. And the majority of people feel the same way as you, Coach. Every time I talk about it, it becomes a bad topic. But my point is, would it have helped Stark if, let's say, they already had 100,000 bikes out there in people's garages that they spent 15, 20 grand for, and they're riding and they're showing up at the track. And now here's a news story that says they're not allowed to race. What kind of a backlash would FIM get? Would it have trumped the pressure that FIM is getting from anybody else? I would say maybe. I would definitely say maybe.
Well, it goes back to, that's why I get so pissed off when you make a decision the way the FIM did, and it's the economic impact, right? Because and you, there's a lot of meat on the bone on what you just brought up, because to think that other manufacturers would go so out of their way to keep somebody else from coming in. They Stark has put a lot of money into Taddy, put a lot of money into R&D. We all talk about we want the sport to grow. You could even argue the fact that, does racing even grow the sport of selling, or does racing sell motorcycles? I would say yes. I don't think it's as influential as it used to be. I don't think the typical person that's going out and buying a Honda Civic is wondering, is it winning in the Formula One races? You know what I mean? Do we know that the R&D is trickling down directly or indirectly? Absolutely. But I go back to the macroeconomic wheel. I think it's pretty petty that somebody would give you a bunch of pushback because you drive an electrical truck. You can drive whatever the fuck you want to drive. It's your money. You spend it how you want. If we go back to the economic side of the whole equation, the question that I have is, what if as an industry we want to see the sport grow, then we should be embracing Stark as much as we're embracing Ducati and we are embracing Triumph. Are we not trying to shut down Triumph because it's a combustible engine? Now think about the hypocrisy of this. You have Honda, who's coming out with an electric engine. I'm not blaming Honda on this FIM decision, but I'm just using that because you brought him up earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got Trey Canard went out and raced one. Nobody told him he couldn't race it because it was a Honda. Or excuse me, they didn't say he couldn't race it because it was an electrical bike. He could race it because it was a Honda. So right there is already. I know that the World
We're
Supercross
speculating, but yeah.
Well, I'm just saying. I know it's not the same governing body. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think FIM is involved with World Supercross. So the idea here, or is it? That's a question that's worth looking at.
That is a great argument, to where if this Honda bike was in the Super Enduro, we had the same result, right?
Well, but isn't
this taking market share?
Is FIM that said he couldn't do the Enduro Cross, correct?
Yes.
And isn't World Supercross FIM?
I don't believe sorry, I think your question is asking if the Japanese championship was under some sort of a sanctioning body like FIM.
I was trying to remember what race did Trey race the electric Honda at?
It was the Japanese championship.
Okay.
Which
I'm sorry, I was in my brain
where yeah.
But that wasn't World Supercross where they're FIM.
Correct, but there was. I have to look because I believe somebody signed up for World Supercross on a Stark, right, which is FIM.
So think about this: if Trey can go and race a Honda electric bike and no pushback, and then you have Triumph and Ducati coming in with a combustible engine and supposedly no pushback, doesn't make any sense. And that's where, again, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say shit to you that you drive an electric truck. Your money, you spend it however you want. I love this. Remember when the YZ400 came out and they're like, oh, it's just the direction we're going. It's the direction we have to go. We got to go for EPA reasons. We got to go, right? Bunch of political bullshit. Okay. Well, at the end of the day, as my dad used to always say, you show your opinion and position on things with your checkbook. Plain and simple, no games attached. If you want the government to take more money from you,
Sorry,
then you
Coach,
vote.
I was wrong. It wasn't World Supercross. It was Joshua Varese. He raced the Stark at the Paris Supercross, and I'd have to do more research to see if Paris was under FIM as well. So
that's what I was wondering. But it goes back to the whole idea that everybody that's live with us here today, and anyone who listens to this as a recording, stop being that asshole that has to always be right. Be willing to listen. But also, like for me, I'm not ever going to go spend my money on an electric truck. But I am more than willing, and Johnny, you and I have talked about this off the record, I'm always willing to listen. You've got a financial background, so you can speak in financial terms. That's the language that resonates with me. I'm not going to judge you, call you a liberal, a libtard, or all this, right? Isn't it interesting how we immediately start to get into name calling? Stop, for Pete's sakes. When the YZ400 came out and they're like, yep, everything's going to go four-stroke. Everything's going to go four-stroke. Well, the way that
what is interesting though is the Paris Supercross is kind of under the FIM rules.
So how can they now
was able to race, but now Taddy wasn't. So now you're like, okay,
that's kind of an AMA route.
Now think that some of the teams in Endurocross that are fitting the bill are really don't want to see Stark in there. So it's more potentially, if I'm speculating, right? Because I don't want to start rumors that aren't true. So this is in fact just hearsay. This is thinking about possible causes. Okay, because we can use our First Amendment.
Yep.
And could it be possible that the teams were wanting to push out Stark because they just didn't want to lose against him, right? I mean, that's what teams are supposed to do, is in all forms of racing. They say, hey, this guy cut the track. Hey, this guy has illegal fuel. Hey, this guy has an illegal bike.
But isn't it interesting? Let's just use Honda since you brought that up as an example. Isn't it how hypocritical is it that somebody who's manufacturing an electric bike is trying to kick out an electrical bike because they're fearful that the bike's going to actually win? That's just, again, it's so petty. It's like, Johnny, you and I do a triathlon together, and if you just kick my ass, I'm not going to go to the government officials and say, Johnny, he needs to be DQ'd. He's too good.
If you were smart, you would. Like, that's racing.
Well,
That's what happens behind the scenes. Like,
that's
I'm sorry,
pathetic.
coach. Like, that's just what happens.
But
Every
that's
professional
pathetic.
race I've been to, no press shows it, but all that kind of BS happens in the background where they try to get people DQ'd for no reason, right?
But how pathetic is that? If you kick my ass, on Monday morning, I'm back at the gym trying to figure out how to be a better swimmer, biker, and runner to beat you. That's what I love about triathlon.
I've even been protested by like winning some enduro races and then getting passed by the people that are protesting me and the teams that are protesting me, and they still want to DQ me after they beat me, right?
But here's the problem. Why are they protesting you? Because they can. That's where the governing body needs to do a better job and keep this frivolous bullshit out of Johnny is just simply faster than you. Stop. And this is where I do agree, like with the claiming rule, where you've got to pay per part that comes off. And if it's been proven that you didn't cheat, you get to keep the cash. Hey, put your money where your mouth is. Do it. Go for it. If you want to break me down, go for it. Because I know I'm going to get your money. And I love that. I'll take your money all day long. But I want to go back out of respect to my dad, because he actually passed away. Yesterday was the anniversary of his death. God bless him. But when they say, thank you, brother. When they say to me, hey, as an industry, we're going to force people to buy 4-strokes because that's the direction that the industry is going. I take that back. I bought one YZ250 4-stroke, one of my boys. I bought him a TTR 50 and a TTR 110. Okay. That is the only 4-stroke I've ever bought, and I've bought over 30 motorcycles in my career. So when you say that you're going to force me into buying an electric car, fuck you. I'm not going to buy an electric car. I'll ride my bicycle before I'll buy an electrical car. Not because I'm against, because it's an electrical car. I don't want to pay the money for it. I don't want to be dependent on, I have to find some place to charge it. Again, I know some of the cars are getting better now where when the motor runs, it recharges itself, which to me makes common sense. But the whole idea here is when you say to me, you're going to force me into a new behavior, it's kind of like the bullshit with the mask. You're not going to force me to wear a mask. I'll give you an example. Michaela, I had committed to Whiskey Throttle. And literally, when we were supposed to go to California, that's when the whole you must wear a mask mandate was implemented. We were actually on vacation down at Anna Maria. And literally the announcement came out, starting tomorrow, the beaches are closed. The government is closing down the beaches. I'm like, how the fuck do you close down a beach? So the next morning, Michaela and I walked down to the beach, and everybody's up and down the beach. The government didn't close the beach. And we were supposed to fly. We had a week's vacation with our daughter, and we were supposed to fly to California to do Whiskey Throttle. And I said to Michaela, I said, I don't know that the flight's going to go. But I had made a commitment to David Pingree. So I went and I rented a Suburban, and I literally built an office in the back of the car so Michaela could do her, because she owns a marketing firm. And we drove straight through to California, did the show, and drove straight back. And the reason why I bring it up is you're not going to force me into any of your agendas, electric engines, masks, whatever. You're not going to modify my behavior through fear and intimidation. I'm just going to take my wallet. I'm going to take my creativity, and I'm going to go a different route. Now, if you choose to wear a mask, even to this day,
you're rare, right? You're rare.
Well, I respect what my dad said. You don't live out of fear. You live your life out of freedom. My dad fought. My dad flew B-52s. We've lost thousands upon thousands of people for freedom. You're not going to strong arm me to make me drive an electric car. You're not going to strong arm me to wear a face mask, especially when the face mask was proven that the virus can still get through the face mask.
You still see some people doing it here, and I'm just like, how are you still scared?
But that's okay.
But that's okay. You are right. That's okay for their own ideology.
That's okay.
Not for you. It's like, okay.
Well, to me, I find it sad because that person's living in fear. they see it as fear, right? Michaela has a family member that, we don't announce what we do. I rented the Suburban. We started driving. I knew that I had to get to California, and some days I had to drive 20 hours a day because I needed to get there. One of her family members they called Michaela, "Hey, what are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, we're driving to California." And the person's exact words to Michaela were, "Why don't you just listen to what the government told you to do?" Like she was a bad person because we had chosen to jump in a vehicle. And what's interesting is here we are driving a Suburban, and at this point you pull into a gas station and it's a ghost town. And you know me, Johnny, I like to ask people about their business. I'm like, "You guys been busy?" Guys like, "You're the first person we've seen today, and it was 2:30 in the afternoon." So you look at the trickle down effect. You get a bunch of people in a bunch of fear, and then that person that's risking their whole livelihood to own a gas station, and the person that's working at the gas station, that trickle down effect. That's why I say don't fuck with the macroeconomic wheel ever. Before you make a decision, ask yourself, is this going to cost people more money? I'm not buying an electric motorcycle. I'm not going to buy an electric car. That's just me. I think they're overpriced. Now I do love it when, you see these. Have you seen them on Instagram where these guys will be on the interstate and they're like a GSXR 1100 and they'll nod to a Tesla and they'll drop it and go, and the Tesla drops them? But that's insane.
Oh yeah, it is. It is.
It's
crazy.
insane. Now, again, I respect that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to go pay for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I watched Trey on that electric Honda. I think it's cool. I'm not going to go buy one. I'm going to go buy whatever two-stroke I can still buy to enjoy riding dirt bikes.
Well, Coach, like, again, most of these corporations are not looking to you because
Right.
they're not going to switch you. They're looking to the youth. There's the whole saying that, like, hard times create strong men create good times, and then good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. I think that there's no argument here that we have been in good times, and now the country and everything is being led, unfortunately, by a lot of my generation, where we've been taught these crazy ideologies to just fall in line, wear a mask, don't ask questions, don't say anything because we're going to cancel you, whatever, right? We're headed towards weak times. And if it wasn't for the Fed just keep printing money, we would already be in a Great Depression. But yet I'm still a giant consumer. Like, I needed a new cycling computer, and what did I go buy? I went and bought the most expensive cycling computer that is around, which is hypocrisy because I'm not going to use near the features that it has on it. But
here's where I'll disagree with you. Your generation is being told that they're supposed to buy and act a certain way. But at the retail level, it's not materializing. And Johnny, you're in the economic world. What are you hearing about all of these manufacturers that ran into this ideology of we're going to build electric vehicles, and they're not selling? They're not selling. So now
they're not selling. Like Teslas, honestly, Teslas are selling out quite a bit.
Tesla's selling out, but they're doing things, Coach, and innovating.
They're not available. If I'm going to argue with you, like these hybrid electric vehicles and the new hydrogen electric vehicles, they're not coming out till 2026, 2027. And it's literally a flip of a switch to control the entire population. Is they're just going to stop building combustion engines.
But you're not going to make them. But you're not going to make them.
But they're not going to, because they're getting a lot of backlash for people. So I'm moving back towards this on the Teddy thing or Tatty thing. If, let's say, you had a bunch of new iterations of electric vehicles that were ready for racing, but there's new rules that haven't been out. I'm talking KTM. I'm talking Honda, Yamaha. There would not be as much of a backlash towards this motorcycle right here. Mm-hmm. And if you talk to anybody that has ridden that motorcycle, they absolutely love it.
So it's interesting. So if you put those two together, right? Somebody rides it, enjoys it. The cost we were talking about earlier about you spending money on a bike, it's part of your current currency. If you were doing triathlons, that bike would sit and you'd probably sell it. Because you're doing triathlons, that bike's important to you, so you continue to use it. Well, if you're going to ride the Stark and you find that you like it and it's a little bit less maintenance, like you said, and et cetera, et cetera. It's got a good ride time. You can ride 30, 40 minutes on it at full speed. It's easy to maintain, blah, 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 blah. You're going to go buy that bike. And that's where, like, I think it's Ford that was saying that they are not able to move the products that they have on their lot. So they're starting to kind of slow down the production and even thinking about going the other direction. Now, like you say, hydrogen brings in another new perspective all over again. But what it does validate is my dad's opinion that people will make their ultimate statement with their wallet. And no matter what the government believes, they're never going to force us into something that we're not willing to do, to the point that whether it becomes an uprising
Well,
of
they
the
did
middle
with
class.
taxes. They did with
Well,
Social Security. You know,
yeah.
taxes was originally implemented just for hey, if you can help out in some sort of a war effort, then great, right? But then we had the Tea Party happen where the government realized we could start taxing everybody, not just the rich, and then it's kind of forgotten. And Coach,
But
I did
the government's not going to be able to keep it up, because did you hear about that one gentleman that had a big warehouse, and he was trying to be, governmentally, he was trying to appease the government. They offered him a big tax break and all that goes with it. He converted his entire warehouse to electric forklifts. And because all of the forklifts, when he was charging them on a daily basis, it literally overran the local power plant, and the local power plant told them that they cannot continue to produce enough power to fuel this guy's forklifts in his warehouse. That the demands of his one warehouse were superseding the demands of the entire town. So the government, again, and this is not a political agenda. I don't care to talk about government. I'm talking about human beings making a decision without walking through the long-term ramifications. That's all I'm saying.
It's propaganda,
So
what it is.
telling Teddy that he can't ride, walk that all the way, walk that 10 chapters forward, walk that 12 months ahead, walk that through, as we just said, a governing body who's embracing it in other elements, but in this environment says, no, we're not going to. So as the jokes go, remember during Supercross, we would hear some grumbling behind the scenes that a couple team managers, their riders weren't really good in the whoop, so the whoops got cut down, and people are like, oh, that's bullshit. That never happens. Well, all you've got to do is look at this whole.
Who fits the major bill on that stuff? Like we've talked about it with motocross. Where the tracks literally pay $100K or more to have the national there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And truthfully, I think Stark is ahead of its time. Like, again, say what you want about me. I like the idea of the electric bike because I don't have a competent mechanic with me anymore. It's me.
Sure.
I like the idea of this bicycle and racing this bicycle because there's only so many bolts and screws on it. I don't have to worry about valves and all sorts of crazy shit to go wrong, right?
Yep.
And I'm not in the air to where if the bike blows up, I need to pull in the clutch, hopefully, and not kill myself. I've been hurt so many times, and a good portion of them has been a bike malfunction. So yes, I am biased about a new machine that comes out that has less moving pieces parts. I don't give a shit if it's good for the environment or not. It's good for my currency of I want to just go have fun, ride a bike, go do more stuff in the woods, etc. But do I think Stark is ahead of its time? Yes. And if you think of, we talked about it earlier, Tesla wasn't in the green until 8 years since they introduced their company and their car. They are now just starting to make money. Amazon, it took them 13 years to make a profit. Apple, I think it took them 6 years to make a profit. So if Stark can hang out, yes, usually the first one through the door gets trampled, but I would say that the Alta was really the first one through the door that got trampled, and Stark built off of what Alta started. And I would like to see Stark continue, but it's going to take them all these trials and tribulations of being canceled. If they can just stick around, if they've got enough financial capacity to stick around, they will be potentially the Tesla of motorcycles, where, again, Coach, I know we're talking about this, but the future of EV vehicles is coming. And
Yeah.
is it going to happen here in the next 5 years? Maybe. Is it going to be every vehicle's out there in the next decade to 2 decades? Probably, right? Just because of the amount of information that is collected with self-driving vehicles, whatnot, that's where it's going. And Tesla has a good, strong footprint in being the first into the game to have a big leading advantage because of all of their, I guess, gas centers around the United States and in the world per se. All the other manufacturers are trying to keep up. And I think this is what's happening with these motorcycles is Honda, Yamaha, all the big Japanese and Austrian companies are trying to, how do we keep up with Stark here? So Stark just needs to.
Well, you brought up something. It was interesting. When I flew out last week to do Gypsy Tales, I had to leave my house at 3 a.m, so I had to Uber out. And I was talking to the gentleman, and I always love speaking to Uber drivers because if you talk to most Uber drivers, especially those that come from a foreign country, Uber is the quickest and most convenient way for them to become productive citizens that are making money. I will give Uber that. And doing traveling as much as we have for so long, it was interesting because when Uber came out, the share was, I don't know the exact number. Let's say it was always in the favor of the driver. So let's say it was 70% went to the driver, 30% went to Uber. Well, speaking to the Uber driver, and I had two of them. I had one from my house to Orlando International, and then when I landed in John Wayne, I took one to Jace's studio. I asked the Uber driver the exact same question in both. How do you like working for Uber? And they both said, it sucks. And I said, why is that? And now the gentleman said that Uber is doing a 50-50. So here the driver using your vehicle or leasing a vehicle from Uber, but stick with me here. You'll see where I'm going with this because you made a comment that is, I think, so on point. If you study Uber's original vision, their vision was the value of Uber really stems from the software. We know this, right? So what Uber has been kind of putting out as kind of their game plan was the driverless cars. So what they did was they wanted to get as many drivers out there. They wanted to fine tune the platform for Uber. And then if you've noticed over the last 3 to 5 years, they started taking more and more of a percentage because they had anticipated by the time they got to 2024 that over half of their cars were going to be driverless driving cars. So they were going to push the drivers out anyways, take all that money in. Of course, the driverless cars have had its own issues, and now they're like, oh shit, what do we do now? Because they really had anticipated that they could have a fleet of 50-60% of their entire base was going to be on cars that have no drivers.
That's what Apple's getting into.
Yeah.
Same thing with it's all AI. This whole global chat GBT crap. It's just you're going to have a personal assistant that.
But when you talk about those e-cars, like you were saying, and then you mentioned the word a driverless, a car that drives itself, and then you put something like Uber on top of that platform, I do agree with you. It's going to go that transitional direction. But here's where it's going to be an ironic twist, only if it's financially feasible. Because if these electric cars and the people that are pushing that technology, if the cost gets to a point where just simply it's cost prohibitive, either you're going to have to discontinue or you're going to have to find a way to produce it. And when you're dealing with, you mentioned cobalt earlier, when you are dealing with an ingredient, an element, whatever terminology you want to give it, when you're that dependent on one thing to make your product successful, think about that. How are you going to all of a sudden if you're going to go off of supply and demand drives the price point and there's less and less supply, but there's more and more demand, that isn't going to decrease pricing. I'm not trying to say that to insult anyone's economic 101 skills, but when you mention cobalt, I mean that's something that comes out of the earth. We can't just, unless they're coming up with a way to artificially create it. You know that better than I do. That's more your wheelhouse than mine. But if you just look at supply and demand and you look at the idea that how are they going to continue to force us as a society to go down these roads when it seems like the materials that are kind of the backbone of it, there's not an endless amount of them. How do we know that? Because the environmentalists run around and tell us that we're killing the world and we're depleting it as it is.
Yeah, it's just a technology thing. Like some guys in the chat too were going, they love their cordless tools. They absolutely love their cordless tools. Like trying to work in your shop and you have cords everywhere, it sucks, right? But your
Yep.
cordless are nice. But the worst thing about cordless is the batteries suck. You're constantly charging them, and then the tools last longer than the batteries. Like that's
Well,
just
but then you're
that's
looking
a
at a battery
technology problem.
that's 2 inches by 2 inches that goes into the landfill, not 6 feet by 6 feet that comes out of a car.
Yeah, but see, that's a problem that is yet to be solved. The
Absolutely.
technology is moving in that direction, and
Yep.
uh,
So the
that's it.
idea that we could create a landfill that could take those things in and maybe be able to recycle them in some capacity, I mean, that's where I see the future. If there's any geniuses that are out there that could come up with a way, again, I go back to the idea that a lot of our playgrounds are made with recyclable plastic. I think that's just home run all the way around. Who could, if you argue with that, you're a moron. You can't argue with that. I mean, that's just genius.
See, I,
Because
I
you
love you, Coach, because some of the things that you say are total right, but then there's some things that eke on the left, and so it's good to hear because there is no black and white. It's just you
no,
always are just going back and forth through this gray area,
but you can't
and
step on other people to try to validate that you're right. So for example, what the FIM is doing to Teddy is bullshit. You know what I mean? They're squashing him as a racer, they're squashing all the R&D and the money that goes into it. And for that reason is why I have such a problem with it. I mean, you could add insult to injury, the fact that he was just given a green light, go for it. And then all of a sudden, literally, what'd you say, 24 hours before? I mean, literally 24 hours before he gets told that he can't do this. That
yeah,
to me is
which
just
is
insane.
absurd. I think that's the biggest problem in this whole debacle is not telling anyone and then just showing up and going, "Hey, the rules have changed," and it's
Right.
right before you're supposed to race. So it was
And we're
definitely a
sorry you
giant.
spent all this money and we're sorry you spent all this time, but hey, we've got enough political pressure that we're just going to go ahead and tell you that you can't race. And stop and think about this, Johnny. It's not like you and I showing up trying to do the race. You're talking one of the number one guys. So if he got treated like this, can you imagine someone that's a second tier rider, what he would have been treated like? Shit. Think about
Which is
that.
which is interesting though, because again, Joshua Varese was at the Paris Supercross and it supposedly went okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yep.
makes you wonder.
Because he wasn't a threat. He wasn't a threat. You've got a guy
There's
that
a
could
good
go out and
point with that
legitimately
too,
win.
right?
Yeah. I always say this when I talk to my young athletes, we teach it we do a lot of sports psychology work with our riders, and we call it the bullseye syndrome. You know, Johnny, when you go locally, when you were a young kid and you rode, you had tons of friends because everybody could beat you. And then as you started getting better and you started getting towards the front, those people that were your friends start telling you, you're not so cool anymore. And maybe you're even cheating a little bit. So we call it the bullseye, where bullseye just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then once you're back as a full bullseye, people that you thought you were friends have completely turned on you. And it gets pretty lonely at the top because now everybody wants to take you down, especially when you're dealing with catty, insecure people, which is exactly what took down Taddy in this whole situation.
Well, and when there's money involved, and that's the analogy that I was going to use too, Coach. Is like for everyone as that is watching this, again, thank you. Make sure that you subscribe and check out Coach's channel. The link is in the description as well. For everyone watching this that say, "Oh, this is complete bullshit," like I would never do that, blah blah blah. How many times has it happened to you where you might have been the fastest guy at the track and you're helping somebody out, but then once that person beats you, now you're no longer wanting to help that person out, right? It's a human condition, and this is just a level where there's just more money involved is all of it, right? So it's a natural reaction that a good portion of the people go through. So it's a bummer
But
it happens.
let me just say this in closing. Can you imagine the shitstorm that would have gotten started if they shut down Trey Kennard at that race? It was just a Japanese race. Wouldn't have mattered. The ripple it would have gone through the media and
For
through the
Honda,
industry
yeah.
because it's Trey Kennard on a factory Honda.
Yeah, yeah, this is the new guy on the block, and is it
Mm-hmm.
hazing? I'm gonna straight up say that this is just hazing, and so this is
It's a
why I hope.
premonition of things to come for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
so I just hope that Stark has enough capital at hand that they can withstand all these major blows. Not want an electric bike right now. No. We're going to start off with what people want, give them what they want, get a fan base, boom. And with our brand, we'll be one of the elitists. And then 10 years down the road, I guarantee you, if Triumph stays around and Ducati stays around, they're going to have an EV dirt bike.
But you just contradicted yourself, because you said they're giving people what they want. So they're building a combustible motor, but yet we're being told we're going to be going electric. See how you just contradicted yourself?
Well, no, because I went in the future, right?
No,
Right
you're
now,
right.
people don't want it. People
No,
don't
you're
want it
right.
because they don't want change, and change
Yeah.
is always better. But with the improvements of technology and the ease, if it makes your life easier, there were same people that said they didn't want this. They did
True.
not want this. They did not want emails. They did not want any of that, but it made their life easier. So therefore, they started using it. The electronic bikes, I am convinced, are going to make people's lives easier. So therefore,
until they don't, because how many people are overwhelmed with emails and text messages now?
I'm always
So it starts out
unsubscribing. So
okay. It starts out okay. And to your point, maybe we find that an electric motorcycle, to everything you said earlier, less moving parts, less chance of something going wrong. It might be the piece that says, okay, it allows us to tip the scales that, you know what, this is completely legit. Now, I know there's some diehards like myself. We're going to miss the smell of the two-stroke, any fuel for that matter, the noise, all that. But your point's well taken. Because everybody thought, wow, the computer is going to put people out of jobs. Well, the computer actually created more jobs. Well, now people complain they've got too many emails and they've got too many text messages. So at what point does it cross that fine line where the changes were good until they weren't? And that's all I'll say with that. To your point, it's we don't you talked about the idea that these are going to be a bunch of hydrogen bombs riding around. As much as we joke about it, if all of a sudden they're just randomly blowing up on the interstate and killing 100 people at a time, guess what? Those hydrogen bombs something's going to go the different direction.
Well, what's going to happen with electric vehicles is the accessories are then going to be in-app purchases, where if you want the new fancy map or whatever, you're going to have to give Stark or Honda a $99 a month deal to use it or some bullshit.
Okay, so you just bring up a very good point. So something that started good becomes a bait and a switch, which becomes an economic burden for the end user. Yet once again, it's bullshit.
And truthfully, I mean, like you said earlier, what your dad said, you vote with your dollars, right? And I think a lot of people right now are voting with their dollars, with saying they don't want to have anything to do with it. But do I somewhat nihilistically think that it's a uphill battle that you're going to lose? Yes, I do. And that's, again, because of my personal beliefs and things that have happened to my life. So it's refreshing.
Well, and you
to
study
hear.
a lot too. So, on that economic side, it's when we talk about respecting the macroeconomic wheel, that's part of it, right? Where's the industry going? Where's the technology going?
I'm just looking at it like, how can I make and how can I monetize the change?
Sure.
Because that's
the money.
That's the point,
That's where the money's at, for sure. So we need to figure out, and everybody in the chat room, let's all build a business together. How do we recycle batteries? If we can figure that one out, we'll make the environmentalists happy. We'll make the capitalists happy. We'll make everybody in the world happy.
And then we
we'll
can shove money towards FIM and AMA to where it's like, hey, here's
we'll just start
a couple
our own.
$1 million.
We'll start our own. We'll start our own. Johnny, you and I talk about off the record. We don't like to work for anybody, so we'll do it ourselves. We don't work for anybody. Screw that.
Yeah.
It's been a great show, man.
There's
awesome.
good in both, Coach, because we just were finishing talking with what was a good thing then becomes not a good thing. But I mean, like, look at the internet. It's given people to be able to work for themselves, essentially. And that's why, like, I'm a big believer in Web3. I'll end it with little mumbo technical stuff. Web 1 was read and write. It was the whole Netscape Navigator. We really couldn't do much with it. It was owned and controlled by one individual, one corporation. Then you have Web 2, which is where we currently live, where you have a bunch of other people, Google, Amazon, whatever. You can kind of post stuff, but they own it, right? And Web 3 is more decentralized, where it's read, write, and own. The content that we produce is something that we're going to own. And that's hopefully where we're headed with more of a utopia civilization. But
I've never
we
heard of
definitely.
Web3. That's interesting. Honestly, I've never heard of that before. It's
Oh
cool.
yeah, I could talk your ear off about other stuff, but anyway, guys,
No, it's good
hey,
stuff.
let me know if you enjoyed the morning show, and we'll trying different things here. Appreciate every single one of you guys. It's December 1st, so Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, wherever you believe. If you don't even believe in it, Happy December, right?
Enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Coach, always a pleasure. Thank you for everything you do for me.
Thank you,
And
brother.
make sure you check out everything that he does for a lot of different athletes. If you're looking for nutrition, if you're looking for training programs, if you're looking for any sort of a coach, he's the guy to go to. His
I
links are in
appreciate
the
it.
description. And till next time, guys, keep it WFO.
Or